Our third speaker for today's meeting is Greg Payne. His speech is going to be a bit longer, and he's going to go into more about leadership and what it takes to be a great leader. Greg.
Boy, am I excited to be here today. I am excited to be up here to talk a little bit about leadership. Now, how many of you remember as a small child finding a big piece of broken glass or even a prism that you would take and you would look up to the sunlight and then you would see all the different elements of sunlight? You'd see the yellows, the oranges, the blues. Leadership is similar to that, in that leadership, the concept is so large that sometimes we forget to take a break and hold a prism up to leadership and break out those components. What I want to do today is break out part of the overall leadership into individual or personal leadership. Now, what do I mean by personal leadership? I mean the leadership that you exert in formal and informal groups that you belong to in your everyday life. If I were to stand up here and I said, you have 30 seconds to picture in your mind what a leader is, I would be willing to bet $100 everybody here would immediately start thinking of recognizable politicians, military officers, sports figures, social activists, people that have had a great influence at a very high level. Most of us completely forget or take for granted the leaders and leadership opportunities in our day-to-day lives and how we influence others directly. To me, personal leadership is best exerted in either the direct levels that you're at with your group or no more than one level above or below. Let's take, for example, a military unit. You have a general, you have a colonel, you have majors, you have captains, lieutenants, sergeants, corporals, and privates. Of course, the general at the very top has leadership. He exerts the vision of the unit. He gives out the detailed orders of the day. The privates carry those out. But in a day-to-day setting, it's the corporals and sergeants that have the most leadership over the privates. In our formal and informal groups, there are three areas that make up where we can both maintain standards and then move the group forward towards excellence. Those areas are the vision of the group, the standards of the group, and the execution or the actions of the group. Visions can be both formal and informal. If you're part of the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or any other national organization, they've written out for you what their vision is for that organization. However, if you belong to the local car club, or in the case of my mother-in-law, a quilting club, I really doubt that quilting club has a formal vision statement, or a charter, or bylaws. But if you stand back and look at any group that you're involved with, it has a vision of what that group's purpose is. For the example of my mother-in-law, in that informal quilting club, it's a bunch of women that typically get together once a week to work on the art and craft of creating quilts. And once a year they create quilts to donate to hospice centers. But primarily it's a social organization where they keep the art and craft of quilt making alive. So in that situation, that group maintains a vision through informal means. Now the second area, standards. Standards are the minimum level of acceptable behavior that's allowed within any kind of a group. An example of formal standards could be building codes. When we have building codes that say you must use 2x4s and they must be 16 inches off center and this is the type of screws that you have to use, these are the minimum standards that a builder has to adhere to. Builders can always go above the code, but they can never go below that standard. As a leader or a person within a group, you have the opportunity to uphold and at least maintain the standards of that group. I have an example of where maintaining the standards, I thought, meant something. And I'm going to use myself as an example. A couple of years ago, okay, more like 15 years ago, I worked as a Boy Scout counselor at a summer camp. I taught shotgun merit badge. Now, throughout the day, I had an hour's time to teach shotgun merit badge. And we covered safety, we covered all sorts of the Olympic events involving shotguns, we covered all sorts of things. But the primary part of that award is the shooting requirement. For that 1 week, we had rain every single morning, and we lost 3 out of the 5 days available to shoot. I had about a dozen students in this class, and the last couple of days we were cranking it out. We were just sitting there, we were shooting, we were moving them through. The requirement or the standard for the award was to be able to hit 24 out of 50 clay birds. We're on the last day. I have a young man, he hasn't been doing so good. In my mind, I'm already thinking he's not going to get this. But the interesting thing for those of you that haven't shot shotgun before is it's similar to shooting free throws or batting a baseball. You sometimes find that somehow it clicks. You get in this groove, right? And you can't miss. You can hit anywhere around the three-point line, and you can hit any pitch that's coming to you. Well, that's what happened with this young man. After going 1 for 5, 2 for 7, not having a very good score, all of a sudden it clicked with him. He was up there. He was able to get his stance right. He was able to follow through, pull the trigger, and keep moving so that he was hitting that bird each and every time. The problem was he came up 1 short. He was 23 for 50. His scoutmaster comes to me. Greg, you know he can shoot. He's got this down now. Can we just sign this off? Now, I'm several weeks into my summer program, and I've had other scouts that have hit that 24 for 50 or a greater average. They've made the standard. If I chose at that point to sign off on that award, the standard's meaningless. So as leaders in a group, you have to at least maintain the standard before you can then try to work to move it to higher levels of excellence. The third component of any group is going to be the execution or the action. That's the reason the group exists. If you think about it, you get the Justice League of America with Batman, Superman, everybody else. They have this vision to fight crime, but they never leave to go fight crime. So they're not really fulfilling the role of that group. They're not really maintaining the vision and the standards that they've set up. Action is what puts those into reality. Now, with action, you have a choice as a leader to make sure that you are maintaining the expected action and outcomes, being accountable to each and every member of that group. You also have the chance to increase that group's actions, to take it to another level of excellence. Think about when you're working on a project here, and you've figured out people have started hitting dates a little bit earlier. People are getting work done a little bit earlier. Your date is still several weeks out before you have to complete the task, but really you could bring that project in a little bit sooner. The easy way out is just to let the project keep moving, close out on the date that it's supposed to. But as part of that group, you can exercise leadership, if you're not the project manager, by bringing up the idea that, hey, let's close this out. Let's finish this project sooner. We're ahead of schedule. Let's go to another level of excellence as a project team. Some of you may not know, but Alpharetta has one of the best youth rugby programs in the Southeast. A few years back, the Alpharetta Phoenix went to the national championship games in Utah. First time a youth rugby program out of the state of Georgia went all the way to the nationals. When that group came back, a number of the parents, coaches, and the club captains got together and said, we like being at the top. Let's go from being just the best in the state to being the best in the Southeast. A committee was formed by parents. We raised up money through fundraisers and increasing the dues. We rented fields. We made the decision to do what it took to make sure that the team could travel to Alabama, North Carolina, Florida, to take on the best talent in those areas, in those states, to try to get that club up to being one of the best in the Southeast. And so far, that's successful. Now, when you step back and we go out of this meeting and we're back to our lives, take a moment from time to time to think about grabbing that prism again and looking at those different components and seeing where you're exercising personal leadership and where you have the chance to not only maintain the vision, the standards, and the execution of your group, but also increase that, taking your group to another level of excellence. If you do this, you're going to find that you're going to keep being referred to and keep coming back to being known as somebody who's a leader. And Toastmasters is a great way to practice these in a very tangible setting. We were having a club meeting for the car club. Nobody's sitting there being the timer. Nobody's sitting there being the grammarian. Nobody's sitting there fulfilling these different roles. But those activities and those lessons that you learn by fulfilling these different leadership roles in Toastmasters are ones that you can take directly to both your informal and formal groups. So again, I challenge you, from time to time, remember being a kid, picking up that piece of glass, examining what it is about leadership, noting what you have to offer as a personal leader, and then going forward and execute that. Mr. Kuzma.